Hello, today is September 21st, and today we are going to be reading our Psalm, which is Psalm 19, verses 7 through 14, as part of our 18th week of Pentecost. The teaching of the Lord is perfect and revives the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure and gives wisdom to the simple. The statutes of the Lord are just and rejoice the heart. The commandment of the Lord is clear and gives light to the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean and endures forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, more than much fine gold, sweeter far than honey, and honey than honey in the comb. By them also is your servant enlightened, and in keeping them there is great reward. Who can detect one's own offenses? Cleanse me from my secret faults. Above all, keep your servant from presumptuous sins. Let them not get dominion over me. Then shall I be whole and sound and innocent of a great offense. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. So, today we have, this week we have a psalm that is all about what Scripture is in the life of the church and in the life of the individual believer. What do we do with Scripture? That the teaching, what does it mean when we say that the teaching of the Lord is perfect and revives the soul? And how is that supposed to affect us? Well, one of the lessons that comes from this psalm, particularly by the later portion of the psalm, verse 11 and 12, by them also is your servant enlightened, and in keeping them there is great reward. Who can detect one's own offenses? Cleanse me from my secret faults. There is a risk that the psalmist is acknowledging that in reading Scripture, we can commit pretty big sins. That in reading Scripture and placing our own desires to control it, we can dictate what we think is important and what is not. The psalmist is not just talking about Scripture is a perfect document, and that is a well and good thing to assert, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And Scripture is not a perfect document that then exists in itself, is self-explanatory, and then we never have to make contact with it. Instead, just refer to it as, oh, well, Scripture is perfect, therefore just follow what Scripture says. The problem is in what we do when we try to figure out what Scripture says. And so when we read the Bible for the sake of understanding what it is for us to believe, or what kind of faith we are supposed to have, what kind of actions we are supposed to live in our day-to-day lives, there are many cultural, historical, social barriers that exist between us and a plain understanding of the Scripture. It should be evident, but reading the Bible without knowing the layers underneath the Bible, without knowing about those who were writing this Scripture, means that we're going to have an incomplete view of Scripture. Not understanding what is coming, what is the origin of Scripture, means that we are doomed to pretending that Scripture emerged out of a vacuum, perfect and whole, when in reality Scripture is the result of God coming into contact with human beings, and then human beings recording it in poetry, in narrative, and in law. And as the student of the Bible can understand, there are different voices in Scripture, and sometimes those voices disagree with one another. You just have to look at the differences between Paul and James, or the differences between the people who wrote Leviticus, the concerns of people who wrote concerns of those who are writing Leviticus, and the concerns of the prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah, or of Jesus himself. And so we have a Scripture that is multivalent. That's a big word, but it has It is multivalent. It has many applications. What kind of a book is the Bible? The book of the Bible is a kind of book that is a collection of books, a collection of people who have been compiled together as a whole witness toward the work of a loving God. And so when we read Scripture faithfully, we are reading for the sake of our faith, faithfully committing ourselves to the truth that is inherent in Scripture. But at the same time, we are critically reading it so that we understand where those different viewpoints have come together and how the Bible is put together. And so when we read that last verse, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. We hear an invocation that gets used a lot in our liturgical life. But the words we say, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable. And that is one thing that we use in our Christian liturgy to center us in truth so that we speak to God. We speak the words of Scripture faithfully. But when we break down what that last phrase is, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer, that last word, redeemer, is a word that is rooted in the form of the redeemer, that God is the redeemer, the one who buys back the Israelites from Egypt. The redeemer is Boaz, who rescues Ruth from a hard situation, who sees her and through his familial loyalty redeems her from someone who does not care about her. God, as acting as a redeemer, and by using this language, the Bible is calling on multiple voices that present the same image of God. And so when we talk about Scripture, when this psalm is urging people to learn what the teaching of the Lord is, it is just as important to read Scripture and to read things that help us understand what is at the core. To be a student of the Bible is not just to read the Bible and to say, this is what I believe. That is a good start. But to be a student of Scripture is to read the Bible and to read it as if there were a group of people trying to tell you a story and telling you in different ways. And so this is why we need outside commentary. This is why we need outside sources and voices that help us read it from outside ourselves. Thank you. I hope to see all of you soon. Bye-bye.